leaders and how that energy fuels performance, connection, and growth. I'm Brady Wilson from Juice Inc. And in each episode, I sit down with leaders and we talk about what fuels them, what sustains them, the lessons they've learned that can be helpful to all of us. And today, lessons that could be helpful in healthcare and the healthcare experience. So today I'm excited to have Sarah Smithson. She is the co-founder and co-CEO of Relational Leadership Partners, a clinician-led organization dedicated to promoting psychologically safe, human-centered culture in healthcare teams through relational leadership. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Brady. Excited to be with you.
Okay, so we'll start today with a question I've been asking leaders for 20 years, and it is what juices you, but I want to put a finer point on it. And it's, Sarah, as you partner with healthcare leaders, what juices you when it comes to fostering more relational practices in their leadership?
Well, thank you, Brady. I love this question because what really juices me is the co-creation that happens when you're coming together with individuals who, in the work that we do, come from different perspectives, different professions in the healthcare space. And when we think about leadership in healthcare, we really think about that opportunity to influence the spaces in which we show up. So they may be leaders who have formal titles, but we really strongly believe that when you show up in a space and you influence it, you are exhibiting leadership. And so when you think about the diversity that folks are showing up into a space with, that usually means there's not a one-size-fits-all leadership tool that every person is going to feel comfortable with.
Right.
And so what really I love is sharing this relational leadership framework with people and watching them dive into the tools, experience them, and then really get to pick and choose what feels most authentic to them. And so being in a space of kind of co-discovery, co-creation with individuals, and then seeing them authentically bring these skills to life in practice, it's hard for me, honestly, to imagine a job that is more fun and fulfilling than that.
I can imagine. And so as I hear you speak, I'm picturing perhaps a clinic where we've got some physicians, we might have some dietitians, we might have nutritionists, we might have all sorts of different healthcare providers. We have somebody who's kind of at the front desk who's potentially the practice manager. We've got nurses, we've got everybody. And there can be sometimes this person and the second class citizen thing in Canada here anyway, where employees can defer to the physicians and they're kind of really driving the whole thing. But what I'm hearing you say is that the framework that you've developed, number one, is accessible to everyone in the system. And they can find their own natural way of demonstrating that no matter where they are in the system. Can you just talk a little bit about, the work that you do? You step in, you're working with some healthcare providers. What's a day in the life of Sarah look like and your partner?
Oh, great question. So it's different every day, which is one thing that I really love about it. Sometimes people will ask us, who is this for? Who is this training for? Who do you work with? And I will say that there's no one size fits all. There's not like it's always working with the C-suite or it's always working with, medical directors. It's really working with the people who feel, I think, closest to this idea of really putting people at the center of their work. So that may mean that we are working with a C-suite that says, look, we want to embody these types of relational practices. We know that the decisions that we make and the way we show up influence the whole organization. And we want to understand in our day-to-day work how to really incorporate relational practices. So we may be working with folks in the C-suite to talk very practically about how they can show up differently. We're not usually talking about bringing a whole new framework or a whole new way of doing what they already do.
Yeah.
It's just a reframing and shifting how they show up. Or we may be working the most, I think, engaging way to do this work is working with a team like what you described,
Yeah.
where we're helping them recognize that hierarchy because it certainly exists.
Yeah.
That idea of identity and power, the way it influences psychological safety and influences often in a negative way people's comfort with bringing their best ideas forward. And
Hmm.
it's not always the formal leader who has the best ideas, right? Or honestly, who even has the most influence in certain
Right.
spaces.
Yeah.
So bringing a whole team together, helping them really start to understand the nuance of identity and power in their spaces, how it shows up, and then how they can really engage more authentically with each other so that they can bring their best ideas to work every day. Again, in the context of the work they're already doing, that is really an incredible transformation when you see that shift start to happen.
I can imagine. Now, you've got a framework. I want you to talk about that in a minute. But first of all, I would imagine you encounter some barriers around, there can be bullying, and that can be physician to, let's say, nurses. It can be the other way around. It's more in Canada. It used to be physician to nurse, and now sometimes a very strong nurse will, either male or female, will actually be bullying young female physicians, which is kind of interesting. There can be that I would never speak up or I would never give my ideas because, of course, the physicians are always smarter. The barriers could be, why would we step into relational leadership? Because it's just, if I get people telling their stories as I'm just trying to make my diagnosis, if they get talking, it's going to take forever. And I won't get through as many patients as I need to get through. So it's going to affect our results in a negative way. So I would imagine you have tons of barriers, and I would bet you that you have a really good rationale for every one of those to get people kind of playing nicely with you. But give me a sense for what are the biggest barriers that you face as you try to bring your framework to the world, and then let's talk about your framework, okay?
Great. That sounds good. I think whether in the US or Canada, and whether you're in healthcare or in other industries, I think it's time and resources, often
Okay.
people resources, right?
Okay.
Especially in the US, we're feeling very much a squeeze of, people are leaving the profession or there's less continuity in teams. And yet the workloads, they don't just remain the same, they're actually growing and growing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, exactly as you pointed out, asking people to show up a little bit differently, even that subtle shift can sometimes feel like more than any one person wants to take on in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I would propose that, it's rare, I think, in healthcare that people show up with an intention to harm each other. And, being harmful to each other is going to flow directly to patients and the
Totally.
patient experience. I think often this comes as a consequence of the pressures of the system.
Yeah.
And to your point, we start to really move towards this narrow lane of solely transaction. And to be clear, transactions need to take place in
Sure.
our systems, right?
Yep.
We need to diagnose problems and write prescriptions. We need to process billing. Those things have to happen. But when that is the only way we're showing up, I actually think what ends up happening is we reduce efficiency in the system, because when we show up purely transactional, it reduces the opportunity for people to cross what they may see as those traditional boundaries of hierarchy.
Okay.
As you mentioned, if for example, you're a medical assistant and you check in the patient and the patient discloses things to you that you understand are probably really important in their care, right?
Right.
You check them in and you see that, and this is a real example, that they've got a bag of Cheetos in their purse that's very high in sodium, and they're there for a follow-up on their blood pressure.
Right.
when you go out to meet the clinician who's going to step in after you, you have an opportunity to disclose that because the patient may not share that with the
Yeah.
clinician. And when you miss that opportunity, I would argue that you really miss an element of connection with the patient, efficiency and quality in their care. So while it can feel like taking that extra moment, and what would it be? What would that extra moment be that might open the door for that medical assistant to approach the clinician? It could be as simple as in the morning when you get there saying, how are you doing today? With
Right.
authenticity, like
Yep.
really meaning it, meaning
Yeah.
that question. Or maybe you know that they have a child who was in a school play last night. Hey, how was the school play?
Yep.
Right? I, it seems to me, especially if you do that consistently, that is a small, it's not even a price, right? Because it's not a price to pay. It's actually a gift to receive. Like if they engage with you in that conversation, it's them giving you a little gift of insight into their life. It's like building or drawing a thread of connection between the two of you.
Hmm.
And what happens then when you have that thread of connection is later in the day, when that clinician is completely worn out and exhausted, and maybe it's curt or short with that medical assistant,
Right.
there's an understanding and appreciation between the two of them that this is not personal.
Yep.
It's not about us together. This is a reflection of me being depleted
Right.
and showing up in this way. If you've got those threads drawing you to each other, that's like a conduit for grace between the
It,
two of you,
oh, that's
which
beautiful.
is so important.
It feels like the extension of goodwill when the physician might forget something or something could go wrong. Goodwill, charitable interpretation, grace is, I think, such a wonderful word. That starts with that question in the morning and is sustained by it. And when I think of what you're talking about, yeah, the transactions, Brady, they have to happen. Like, it's just that when the patient sums up their experience, they could sum it up as, oh, that was transactional, tick box, robotic, automaton, or they could say, no, it wasn't just transaction. It was actually somewhat interactive. Or they could say it's actually pretty relational with this healthcare team. Or they could say this is actually, it feels like partnering in my
Oh,
health, in my, like they're holding out for my highest good. I can see that in a way. So how quickly can we move from transaction over to partnering and relationships? I think that is kind of what you're saying here, and it starts with just simple humanizing questions and stories.
absolutely. And I love that idea of that partnership. I mean, what's always struck me as it seems like healthcare has evolved into greater and greater complexity, in some ways, feeling more and more broken,
Yeah.
is that I truly believe that members of the care team and patients want so many of the same things. I think for many of us, we are so aligned in wanting to feel that sense of connection, that sense of being seen, ultimately, that sense of partnering in our health. And I think that there are strategies. I mean, the system does not make it easy, that's for sure.
Sure.
But there are strategies where we can build those connections because as much as the transactions and what we've achieved at the end of the day in healthcare is important, we spend the majority of our time in the process, in the day to day of being with each other. And if we don't find some element of that being with each other that fills us back up, that's when at the very end of the day, the tank is on empty. Maybe it's below empty, if that's even possible. And the idea that you can replenish yourself overnight and show up the next day and do it all over again, it's not really a very human approach to think that that can happen.
There's a best before date to that, isn't there?
Hmm.
Sarah, the kind of connectivity between, okay, so we want a great patient experience. We want great results, so efficacy and evidence-based results and all of that. And we also want a great colleague experience, employee experience, whatever you want to call that. And if you were to ask the C-suite, is there one of those that drives the other two? Like often leaders tell us, okay, yes, we'll admit it. It's the colleague experience that drives both the patient experience
Oh,
and right. And
yes.
I think so. It sounds to me like where you're starting is let's get at that one right there. Is that true? Is it fair to say?
From my perspective, absolutely. For
Mm.
me, a root cause, not the root cause,
Yeah.
because healthcare is so complex, but a root cause of so many of our issues in clinical medicine have a lack of relationships at their core. Now,
Right.
I think the challenge is that root cause is not always most proximal to the financial bottom line, which is usually what's driving
Right.
many decisions. This is not, I have no desire to villainize those who are on the administrative
Yeah.
side or making these decisions. They have a very difficult job. And I
Sure.
think, again, so much of what we want is aligned. Sometimes the systemic incentives are not fully aligned with
Hmm.
seeing that direct connection
Right.
between the importance of relationships and ultimately that financial bottom line.
Right. Right. When I think about a physician, so let's just talk about them for a moment. I know you're dealing with everybody in the system, but if I think about what actually heals my patients, there's a pharmacological kind of viewpoint. There's all kinds of things that can create a healing experience, and one that may get kind of put on the shelf is just the power of human connection, the power of feeling seen, the power of feeling heard, especially by somebody who the patient, whether it's reveres anymore, maybe that's the old days, but at least highly respects. And so, like you and I both know that if there is just a moment of true connection, and it's not just getting the patient to tell their stories, but I think what you're really trying to do too is have physicians tell their stories, not in a gratuitous sense, not taking over the conversation, but some sort of vulnerable sharing of their lives, which creates connection. Well, we know that releases oxytocin in the patient's brain.
Mhm.
With that comes trust and bonding and rapport and all those wonderful, benevolent neuromodulators. And if they can actually have a conversation where the person starts to see a sense of possibility about their healthcare, then dopamine starts to flow. And with that, there's a little bit more creativity and goal orientation. And if it feels like, okay, we're actually co-creating and chunking down your challenge, whether it's diabetes or obesity, whatever it is, then serotonin starts to flow and there's a sense of agency, belief, and confidence and self-efficacy. And if you have a patient who's experiencing more connection and more creativity and more confidence, I feel like you've now got somebody who is partnering in their own healthcare versus the doctor saying, if you don't manage your diet, necrosis is going to set in and you're actually going to lose a foot. And just that ultimatum that doesn't change behavior at all, right?
That's so true. Yes. And there have been research studies, right, that have shown that the stronger the relationship between patients and their clinicians, the more likely they are to consistently take their medications. As a clinician, if you write the prescription and send it to the pharmacy and it never gets filled,
Yep.
you may feel like you have done your job, right?
Hmm.
You checked the box.
Yep.
But when it comes to really moving the needle on health and well-being, you're not even coming close. And I think you're absolutely right that this power of relationship, and in some ways, right, it's relationships that treat or prevent loneliness. And we
Mm,
know the health impacts of loneliness and isolation are dramatic. And
okay.
so I don't know that I'll speak as a physician, that's
Hmm.
my training and practice by
Yeah.
background. I don't recall ever really being trained that part of how I show up in a healing space
Yeah.
is as a form of connection for patients. But I can tell you that there were many patients that I worked with and partnered with as a primary care doctor where I would sometimes feel like, well, I don't really know if I did much for them
Yeah.
today. I didn't order any labs, I didn't write any prescriptions. But over time, what I started to realize was that my steady presence,
Yeah.
creating the space, the container where they knew they could openly share with me, and I was going to just take that in. I was not going to show up with judgment. I was going to be there and be present with them, and in some ways bear witness to and
Right.
validate their experience. That was my intervention, which takes us back to some of those incentives, right?
Right.
There was no billing that happened. There was no, oh, I was able to bear witness today. Let me submit to the insurance company for that.
Yeah.
And I would argue that for some patients, that was the most potent and powerful way that I could show up as a partner in their healing.
It is so, so beautiful. Yeah, I'm thinking about The Body Keeps Score. You may have or read that book. But basically, how we can so easily stuff down and
Mhm.
repress things that uh, they will affect us because the body is so systemic and it's going to show up somewhere. But if we can have a person that is trustworthy and creates safe psychological space, and if we can begin to talk about those things, that there's just a lot of healing that can happen. I think you're kind of addressing that.
Absolutely. And I think you raised another important point, which is to what degree um, should or can the physician or the clinician, if it's an advanced practice provider,
Yeah,
share an aspect of themselves as a part of this partnership. And I think that is so important and really nuanced. I was taught as a medical student that I should put on my white coat, and whatever
yeah,
was inside my white coat should stay
right.
inside the white coat.
Yeah.
That this encounter was about the patient and solely about them, and I should share nothing about myself.
Oh my goodness.
And as a primary care doctor, that in for me and in my opinion, that was not a sustainable way
Hmm.
for me to show up because I was there to be in relationship with my patients. I want to
Right.
be very clear there are professional boundaries that we should
Sure.
not cross, and I'm not suggesting that.
Sure.
But there are certainly moments when sharing a little bit of your own experience. And I would say sometimes it's very tempting if someone's sharing something. It's so tempting to jump in and say, oh, I get it. I get it. I know exactly how you feel because, and
Yeah.
share your story.
Right.
That's not usually the best
No.
strategy.
No.
But to say, as I listen to what you're describing, um, it's reminding me of something. Do you mind if I share just a little bit, right? And if you have their permission
Yep.
to share that experience and then to ask them for some clarification.
Yeah.
Is that similar to what you're experiencing? And if they say yes, you have probably built a connection with them. And if they say no, it creates an incredible opportunity for you as a partner in their care to better understand, to ask more questions and understand their experience and how it's different from yours. I think I've heard you speak about this
Hmm.
before.
Yes. And I'm going to ask you a fairly personal question, and you get to say, Brady, I'll take a pass. But could you give an example of a story that you might first of all, get permission to tell. And that could be really helpful for a patient. And sometimes we have certain stories that we return to because they're so pivotal and important in our life, and they can be so helpful for other people. Could you give me an example of one that you have shared that was helpful for somebody from your life?
Well, I think this is so, it's so nuanced because this is where that human connection becomes so, so important. I think that as a clinician, when you walk into the room as a human, if you are really being present in that moment, you are like scanning that environment the minute you walk in, right? What is the energy in the room? What is the patient's body language? Are they looking at me? Are they head down? Are they slumped? Are they upright and smiling? And so all of that to say, I think that it is a very, I can't say that there's necessarily a story that I have like reused with patients because it's so moment to moment. And I really believe it's so important to be fully listening to them. I'm usually not like preparing what's coming next.
No, for sure.
I'm like immersed in that moment. I will say, there's an incredible patient of mine who just has this incredible, like this beautiful spirituality about her. She would show up in clinic and ask me about things in my life that I had not shared with her, I had not put out on social media. And, it was an amazing experience. And I usually had to ask myself, well, gosh, how much do I want to acknowledge? I mean, she was usually spot on, right? And this was a visit about her, not a visit about me.
Right,
and so
right.
I would have to, kind of decide how much I wanted to disclose.
Sure.
When I began sharing with patients that I was going to transition to working for a nonprofit and I was going to be stepping out of the exam room, I was really worried that patients would be mad at me, that they would be upset with me. Not a single patient was upset with me. At least they didn't tell me that. And in fact, this patient said, she said, I feel like you're carrying some guilt, like you're worried that you're kind of leaving us. And she said, you're not leaving clinical practice. She said, you're shifting from traditional patients to the care teams as your patients. You're still going to be being a doctor. And I think it was that beautiful connection that we had built over time that gave her that insight to me. And it truly felt like we were in partnership along the way.
Yeah.
And the PCP who took over after me texted me about a year later and said, I have a really strange question. Does this patient come and know things about you that you have not shared? And I said to her, yes. Isn't it amazing?
And you had a choice. I have these concerns. I have a little anxiety or fear about, will people feel abandoned and left behind, and that I kind of deserted them. You could have shared that, or you could have not shared it, but you chose to step into it. And that's exactly, I think, what we want to talk about in terms of that choice point that physicians face. How vulnerable will I be? And will that serve the therapeutic relationship or not? And I think what you're saying is, of course, discretion, and you need to be diplomatic, and it needs to be permission-based. But generally speaking, if we can step into the humanity of the situation, it is going to be more healing than not.
Absolutely. And if you have established that relationship where you're giving each other grace, if you do misstep, that person, they're not going to be upset with you because you tried to make a connection.
Right.
Especially if you offer it with humility.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about your framework. And I'm not sure if this is something you're comfortable sharing, but I can only imagine that we've got listeners who are thinking, okay, well, what's your secret sauce here, Sarah? And uh, would I want to bring you into our situation? And I hope that a lot of listeners will actually be asking that question, and the answer might be yes. So, what is it that you bring in terms of a framework?
Yes, we use a framework that, as I mentioned, it's about truly putting people at the center of the work that we do through
Yeah.
very practical actions. And so, as many leadership development frameworks are designed, we're thinking about this in different contexts, this context of self, this context of team, and the context
Mhm.
of system. And then looking at a relational leadership framework that really talks about authenticity, inclusion, growth, and the beauty of that framework, which is about developing a relational culture. So, what are the actual practices that we can engage in to
Mhm.
promote inclusion and authenticity and growth? It layers really beautifully over the framework of psychological safety. And
Okay.
particularly, you may be familiar with Timothy Clark's work on he breaks psychological safety down into four specific types of safety. And those include things like learner safety, challenger safety, contributor safety. Those layer really beautifully on the framework of relational leadership to promote a
Mhm.
relational culture. And so we look within that framework and we look at self, team, and systems. And then we have a whole suite of skills that we teach. And some of these skills, many of them, they're very basic skills. So one would be introducing a check in to your meetings and
Yep.
doing that consistently.
Yep.
And that feels straightforward. But if you are in an environment that is almost wholly transactional,
Yeah.
if you show up one day and say, let's do a check in, how about let's do a weather check? What is everyone's internal weather today?
Right.
People may look at you like, are you okay? Should we call someone?
Imagine.
And
Yeah.
so, while these things are fairly straightforward and simple in design, that doesn't mean that they're always easy to implement. And so we try to
Mhm.
help people navigate, again, find the ones that are most authentic to them, that are most useful out of their toolkit, and then actually implement them in practice.
Beautiful. So, a relational culture. Uh, and I can imagine a lot of people would be listening and going, like, what other kind of culture? Like, how can it not be relational? But everything you said prior to this is saying the gravitational pull, Brady, is for it not to be relational. The gravitational pull is for it to be transactional. And there are 100 different reasons why that is true. And so it is swimming upstream culturally. And I would imagine that AI is only exacerbating that because patients can know more about their own symptoms and their own condition than any physician could ever hope to know because they can
Mhm.
drill down as deep as they want using AI and other means. But I can imagine that as we think about AI and physicians utilizing AI in terms of diagnosing, there's some real utility in having a tool that can go in seconds. I've looked at everything, and it seems to me that it could be this, this, or this, and a physician going, actually, I never thought about that. So that could lead one to say, I've now got more time to be more relational, or it
Yes.
could lead them to super transactional. So we're not going to go deep on AI, but it's a thing.
It
And
is,
yeah,
yes.
and so I'm wondering if you just comment on that in terms of a relational culture. Where does AI fit into that?
I love this question, and I am by no means an AI expert at all, but I think you've hit on some really important elements, which is AI is an Um, tool. You know, Patients having access to different forms of AI is incredibly valuable. I think it's especially valuable when it's coupled with that relational approach to what we would traditionally call history taking, right? So when a
Yeah.
patient comes in with a concern, and as a clinician, we're trying to better understand what that concern, what shape and form it's taking and impact it's having on that patient's life, I think we're going to be able to do that in a much more nuanced way than AI. So if we can do that and then combine it with the output from AI, put on our, critical thinking clinician caps and share with the patient our overall assessment of what we've learned about the patient experience and what the output from the AI is. And
Yeah.
when we then are demonstrating to patients, as you said, maybe we see something on there and we say, oh, that's great. That would not have crossed my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there are clinicians who would never dream to say that out loud in front of a
Exactly.
patient.
Sure.
But imagine if you did, how that patient would feel about being a partner in that interaction, right? To say, I can see my clinician's thought process. I can see them acknowledging that they don't have all the answers and being open to what I bring to the space. I
Yes.
mean, I think in some ways this is about engagement, right? Like,
Yeah.
you want to be able to see yourself in the outcome of the process. This to me is a great example of both the clinician and the patient as aided by a deep technology, creating ideally the best outcome and seeing both of their contributions in that space. That feels pretty fulfilling to
I,
me.
I truly, truly. And fulfilling if one does not take their identity in advice giver, experience dispenser, and doctor equals demigod. But when we're working in healthcare, we have to, our job is to help people, and especially leaders, shift from parenting to partnering.
Mhm.
Right. And so parenting can be the type of parent that is autocratic. I know it all. I'm going to dispense all my experience and wisdom. I don't need to hear from you. But it can also be the other kind of parent, which is the over nurturing, helicoptering. And I don't actually challenge the patient to come forward. And so I think what you're saying is that shift to partnering is we can co-create a solution together. And I can see that for you, and this is not every patient, but for you, you've dug deeply into this. And I could never take all the time with your condition that you are able to do basically 24/7. And so let's bring both of these resources together and get you the best outcome possible. There's a bit of humility in that, it feels to me.
Oh,
But
absolutely. But you can't be in partnership with another person if you think you have all the answers.
mm, yeah, exactly.
And
So
I
yeah,
do
go ahead.
just as much as this is not going to be the approach for every physician. This is not the approach that every patient wants. I mean, I've had patients, I've always, since I was just starting out, I've
Mhm.
always thought about this relationship as one that's a partnership. What I would often describe to patients is you're the quarterback in the game. I'm the coach on the sidelines.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
everyone's coming at you in real time. You're having to make really quick decisions. I'm your coach on the sidelines, trying to give you and prepare you the best I can for what's going to come. Not every patient wants that. Some patients do want the, all-knowing physician who says, this is the problem, this is solution, go forth and do
Yeah,
it. So I do want to be clear. This again it's not a perfect approach for every clinician or every patient.
truly. Yeah, and I love that very bespoke approach that you're taking. It really honors where the patient is coming from and what they truly need. Sarah, when things go the way you want them to go and you hit it out of the park, relational leadership, just, everybody's going, you got so much traction
Mhm.
and we really changed. And it's been 6 to 12 months, it's been 2 years, and things are different here now.
Mhm.
What are they saying about what's different? And what are the types of sustainable results that you've seen as a result of doing the good work that you do?
Yeah, when this goes really well, people will often use the word transformational because they will say things like, "This is how I always wanted to show up, but I didn't know it was okay. I didn't know that I could lead this way, or I didn't know that it was okay for me to use some of these tools." And so we see people coming back and saying, "This has helped me achieve promotions. This has helped me partner with people across my institution who I didn't know before. And we are engaging in incredible sustainable projects together that we never would have achieved if we didn't have this shared language and this shared approach." We're seeing people who say, "This is incredible. I want to take this into other spaces." And now we are seeing people teach this, either teach it to in academic spaces, incorporate it into their classroom,
Yeah.
or teach it to their colleagues. And so we love that. Our approach is not, "This is our framework. We hold it tightly." We very much want this work to be out in the world. We
Yeah.
want to see that change happening like a ripple throughout different spaces.
It feels to me like, first of all, this is gorgeous, beautiful. But I just want to say, as I listen to you, had you not started as a physician in healthcare, had you been somewhere else in leadership, in a not for profit, of clean water in third world countries or whatever, I feel like what might be true of you, and I want to find out if this is accurate or not, humanizing whatever work it is that we do, and human connection, and allowing people that growth mindset to really flourish. A lot of the and shifting from transactional to true, genuine, authentic human connection. I would bet you'd be doing that no matter where you landed. Is that true?
I have not considered that, but I think it's probably true. I'm one of those people who, from a very early age, I said, "I want to be a doctor." And then I just was
Okay.
kind of laser focused on that path.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
said, as I have been doing this work and I've looked around and reflected, relationships are a key theme for me in that, relationships from 30, 40 years ago in my life are relationships that I still hold that are incredibly important to me. Even just this last weekend, I was able to reconnect with friends, from my time in undergraduate and medical school. And it's just, you look back and realize, wow, we're talking like decades, a quarter century
Wow.
of shared experiences together. And there's just something that is so valuable in that to me. I mean, my very first practice out of residency was an interprofessional practice where we delivered team based care and we had huddles.
Mm-hmm.
And I still meet with the physician assistant and dietitian from that practice about every 6 to 8 weeks. We have dinner together. So I suspect the answer is yes. I was joking with the co-founder of Relational Leadership Partners. I said, "I hope this is okay with you, but just know, when we're in relationship, it's probably going to be for the long haul. So as long as you're okay with that." And of course, the people who do this work, it's a beautiful, beautiful community of people. So there's really no better group to be in relationship with.
One of the things that I am most proud about Mike. So I have four kids. The oldest is 43, and then down to 37. And I am so proud of one thing, and that is that each of them in their own way have had relationships that really went south for reasons many times not associated with them at all. They were really hurt. They were really
Yeah.
disappointed. They were taken
Yeah.
advantage of or whatever. And where they could have
Yeah.
written the person off and held them at arm's length and you're an outcast from my life, every one of my kids has now relationships that are strong and robust that easily could have just been a damaging thing forever. And so one of the things I want to ask you in relational leadership, there's a prevailing mindset that trust is hard to build, easy to break. And once it's
Yeah.
broken, it can never rebuild. I don't believe that at all. I believe
No.
that trust is far more malleable and elastic than we give it credence for. And I have this feeling that being able to go through a relationship is not about never make a mistake, and
Oh, no.
it's not about a misstep. We clean up. And in fact, I would say the brain doesn't even code for trust until we've had a breakdown, and we come back, we clean it up, and it's like, now I know that you have my best interests at heart.
Yes.
Right? It was
Yeah.
unproven trust before, and now it is proven and validated trust. Could you speak about trust in the in this whole concept of relational leadership?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I do want to be clear. I think people need to have their boundaries, right? What they are willing to tolerate and not,
Mm-hmm.
and recognize the value of time in this experience of relationship with others.
Yeah.
So when I think about trust, sometimes it can feel like trust and psychological safety get a little bit muddled together.
Right.
And what I have really been thinking about a lot lately is this idea of, and you alluded to it, that trust is more about quantity, right? That I am consistently showing up the way I say I'm going to show up, and that when I'm in partnership or relationship with other people, they know what to expect when they're around me. And sometimes when I show up in a way that that other person doesn't expect, especially if it's hurtful or harmful to them,
Mm-hmm.
that's when the trust is fractured.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that we can't regain it, but it is that we need to focus on repair, right?
Yep.
And again, I'm thinking about this idea of perspective. Probably the two of us are going to have differences of opinion about what happened and about the experience. So exploring that together, which is,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be hard, and being in relationship with people is hard. To your point, some of our richest relationships are some of our hardest
Yes.
relationships. And so if we can try to come back together, we don't have to ultimately agree, but if we can explore with curiosity the other person's experience, and at least, acknowledge that we can see how they had that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to agree with it. And then we can start again to show up as we expect each other to show up, to gradually rebuild that trust. And the difference between that and psychological safety is more about the quality with which we show up, creating a space in a container where we're inviting the perspectives of others, where we invite differences in perspective, where we honor those differences when they do appear. Which, again, that's a little bit different than I do what I say I'm going to do when I'm going to
Right.
do it. And I do that consistently. And you can
Yeah.
rely on me to be a certain way. Psychological safety is more about what is that space that I'm helping to co-create with everyone who's showing up together so that we can really have a quality conversation.
Yeah. Sarah, can you comment on one thing? We have seen psychological safety weaponized.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such an irony, and it's so counterintuitive that something that's about safety can be the weapon. But
Mhm.
I think both you and I are saying that there is a soft side and a hard side to holding out for each other's highest good. The soft side is I include you. You are accepted, like without any conditions. Be unique. Be who you
Yes.
are. And the hard side is because of all of that, stop shape shifting. Stop trying
Mhm.
to fit in. Just be who you are. And so we need both the soft and the hard. But when people start to speak their truth, and it's always kind of lowercase t, there's never,
Yes,
I
yes.
don't know anybody who's got uppercase t, but when people are vulnerable and share, how they're being maybe a tough piece of feedback, another person can say, I don't feel any psychological safety here. Uh,
All
and
right.
so, and so we basically create this vacuum where we cannot ever be real with each other because, violating psychological safety. Can you speak to that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's been this, um, confusion of psychological safety with comfort. And if
Yeah,
we suddenly feel uncomfortable, then we
right.
say, well, I'm not safe, right? Which is ironic because psychological safety is actually about being uncomfortable. It's about coming into spaces and being able to invite and or express opinions that are counter to the prevailing opinion and know that you can do so without being at risk of
Right.
your job will not be in jeopardy. You will not be, harmed emotionally or physically. But to your point, to present that counter opinion can, by definition, feel very uncomfortable because
Right.
we're humans. We want to be included. We want to fit in. We want to be part of the group. And if we feel like we need to express something that is counter to the general approach of the group, that is going to most likely make us feel a bit uncomfortable. And if someone else expresses something that's different, even if we were in that part of the status quo, we were going to go with the flow, it can make us say, whoa, I don't know, I feel some tension or conflict and this feels uncomfortable. But the beauty of true psychological safety is that is where the great stuff is, right? When we are um, feeling that tension, that implies that we might be on the verge of change. Something's changing inside us. We're learning something
Yeah.
different. We're going to see something from a different perspective. That is how we grow as individuals. It's how, as teams, we create our very best work, which is one of the things that I love about our work at Relational Leadership Partners is we get to build in structures, skills, and strategies
Mm,
that help teams in some ways accelerate that work to get into that space of being able to express differences of opinion
lovely.
more quickly than they would if we were not paying attention to that development of culture along the way. So this is, I mean, it's sounding straightforward when we talk about it. Obviously, it can be very messy and involves a lot around, identity and power and hierarchy. But the
Hmm.
potential, if you can get a group into that uncomfortable space together
Yeah.
and come out on the other side, wow. Like those are the teams that ultimately feel both amazing to be a part of and can be unstoppable in the workplace.
You've painted a picture for me of you and your partner in the midst of one of those conversations with a team where somebody is saying, putting up their hands like, that's not psychologically safe. And you're going, let's
Mm.
paint a picture of what psychological safety is really about. And shifting a mindset where there's been an assumption, a prevailing story that conflict is bad, and you're helping people become a mature human being where you know what, we can actually hold the tension. It doesn't have to be either or, and we can step into the chaos and see generative solutions come out. There are people who actually don't think that's possible, and I think what you're doing is you're creating an entree into a different world, a little aperture, but it's a small thing, but on the other side of it is this ever expanding world of
Oh.
possibility of,
Mhm.
yeah, psychological safety is vital, but it doesn't mean that, it means
Mhm.
this. And so it
That's
sounds
right. Yeah.
really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if people want to get a hold of you, where do they go? Because I hope that people, and I think that people are going to be looking for more.
Yeah, would love to engage with anyone who wants to learn more.
Yep.
And again, our business is Relational Leadership Partners. Our
Okay.
website is at rlpconnect.com, or they can email me. It's Sarah, SARAH, at rlpconnect.com.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Sarah, I want to thank you for, I know you could have been doing other things, and there are emails pouring in and voicemails and things you could be writing and project you could be working on. So thank you for devoting your time for our listeners. We appreciate it. All of us, I appreciate it. And so I just have a lot of gratefulness that you spent some time with us today.
Well, thank you, Brady. It's been a lot of fun, great questions. So thank you.